Hi there, Yumi Steins here, host of the podcast Ladies We Need to Talk. We're all about health and wellness, sex and relationships. If it's going off in your group chat, we're going to talk about it on Ladies We Need to Talk. Perimenopause, fertility, your love life, the mental load, Ozempic. Nothing's off limits. Find Ladies We Need to Talk on the ABC Listen app and all the usual places.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
It's the case captivating the world. You've got a lot of questions, and today we'll try to answer them. I'm the ABC's court reporter, Kristian Silva.
And I'm Stockwell. It is Monday the 12th of May. Welcome to Mushroom Case Daily.
The small-town mystery that's gripped the nation and made headlines around the world.
Ms. Patterson admits she lied to police about foraging for mushrooms.
A doctor says he told Erin Patterson she could die without urgent treatment.
At the heart of this case will be the jury's interpretation of Erin Patterson's intentions.
It's a tragedy what's happened. I love them.
So today on Mushroom Case Daily is a little bit different to what we have been doing over the last couple of weeks. There was no court today. This was an admin day. The jury is off. And we thought we would take this as an opportunity to answer some of your questions.
Yeah, you've been sending so many in. We're going to do our best to get through some of the best.
Yep. And just to sort of bring you up to speed on how we got here, I mentioned this briefly on Friday, but I do just want to remind everybody of who the key players are, what we're doing here. So all of this revolves around a lunch that Erin Patterson held in late July 2023. She invited 5 people over. Of those 5 people, 4 of them came around to the lunch. 1 of them didn't show. And of the 4 who attended, 3 of them passed away following the lunch. And
they're all her relatives, extended relatives, linked to her estranged husband. He was the 5th person who didn't show up.
Yeah, that's right. There's a whole bunch of episodes we've got on this. If you want to go back and listen to some of them, you can catch up on some of the bits and pieces. The ABC has also done lots of wonderful reporting on this case. And so if you jump onto the ABC website, you'll be able to check out some of that. But today, we have been covering the trial every single day. That's why it's called Mushroom Case Daily. When court finishes, we drop into your feed with a new episode. But today, because we've got the day off, we thought we'd get to some of your questions. And we have had a really wide array. We've got questions about how people found out it was mushrooms so quickly, where the mushrooms came from, motive, how a jury works. There's so much I want to get through today. So I want to start today's with a question from Ash, who asked that question: how did they conclude that it was mushrooms so quickly?
Well, it took a couple of days for them to do this. So this lunch was held on a Saturday, and by the following day, the Sunday, the 4 guests who turned up were pretty sick and they were presenting to hospital. Initially, the doctors thought it was gastro, some sort of food poisoning thing. But when they did their testing, they found that there were abnormal liver function tests. And so as they start investigating the source of the meal, they become aware that there are mushrooms in there. And as the testing continues later on into the Sunday, the doctors have said that the tests do not start to match up with gastro. And in fact, what it's starting to resemble is mushroom poisoning. So a toxicologist gets involved. His name was Dr. Mark Douglas, and he starts to suspect Amanita pallidus, which is the scientific term for death cap mushrooms.
Right.
By the following day, the Monday, all of them are starting to receive specialised treatment. There's a working diagnosis of death cap mushroom poisoning. So this is kind of like the early stages here.
Yep.
Meanwhile, there's also testing that's being done on some leftovers that were found in a bin outside Erin Patterson's house. And interestingly, the tests done on these leftovers don't reveal that there's Amanita pallidus in those leftovers.
Right.
So there's a discrepancy between what's found in Erin Patterson's bin and the symptoms being suffered by the lunch guests. Within a couple of days, 3 of the 4 guests have died. They've all suffered from severe liver function problems, organ failure. Ian Wilkinson was the only one who pulled through, but he also had similar symptoms. So when there was testing done on the 3 people who died, the results were consistent with Amanita felidus poisoning, even though in the cases of the two women, there were no toxins that were found in their bodies. But when they did the autopsy and had a look, it was pretty typical of that.
Right, okay.
Now, I just want to go to one more piece of forensic evidence, and we've heard that the dehydrator that was used to prepare the meal, that was analysed after it was found in the tip a few days after the lunch, and the prosecution have said that that analysis of the dehydrator revealed Amanita felidus. One final thing to mention is the defence is not disputing the fact that there were death cap mushrooms in the meal. They don't dispute the fact that the people fell sick with death cap mushroom poisoning. It is agreed. The contest in this case is the intent and whether Erin Patterson intended to poison these people. The defence obviously says no, she did not.
Yeah. You mentioned before that the beef Wellington that was taken from the rubbish, the leftovers, didn't have death cap mushrooms in it. How's the prosecution kind of explaining that, justifying that? You know, this is the leftovers of this meal that is, you know, they're saying is what killed these people, but there's nothing in that.
Well, we haven't really got to a detailed analysis of that yet. Keeping in mind there's still a long way to go in this trial. But what the prosecution has always said is that they believe that the food that Erin Patterson ate and the food that was given to her children the following day is not the same food as what was given to the lunch guests. They say it may have been dressed up the same, it may have been dressed up as leftovers, but the contents, the ingredients are not the same, and the key thing that's missing, according to the prosecution, is the death cap mushrooms.
Yeah. And another thing I wouldn't mind touching on quickly is just the source of the mushrooms, because we heard last week that initially Erin Patterson was saying that she got these mushrooms from an Asian grocer, from the Woolies. What do we know about where they came from, though?
Yeah, so Erin Patterson was quizzed about where the mushrooms in this meal came from. Doctors have said a combination of things, but the story that seems to come out is that some were from the local Woolworths supermarket and some were from an unspecified Asian grocer somewhere in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. Prosecutors have said that they believe in the lead up to this lunch that Erin Patterson travelled to two areas relatively close to her house where death cap mushrooms were said to be growing. We have not got to that evidence yet in the trial. It has been flagged in the openings, so that might be something that comes up in the next week or two about their suggestions of where the mushrooms may have come from.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Kristian. Another question here from Wendy in Melbourne. Wendy says, enjoying the pod. Thank you, Wendy. Good way to get your question read out. She's asked about the defence questioning Ian Wilkinson, the surviving guest, about the plates that the meal was served on. We heard last week that there were 4 grey plates that the guest was served on. Erin Patterson had a different coloured plate, sort of a reddy orangey plate. Colin Mandy and Ian had this conversation in court last week where they talked about the 4 grey plates that the lunch guest was served on and then the orange plate that Erin Patterson used herself. She had a different plate to the rest of them.
That's what the prosecution says.
That's what the prosecution is saying, yes. Wendy is wondering, where's Colin Mandy going with this? What's he trying to get Ian Wilkinson to say? What is he setting up for?
I looked through the transcript again to just check out this exchange that the two of them had during the cross-examination. And Colin Mandy said to Ian Wilkinson, let me suggest there was no smaller plate. All of the plates were the same size. So again, contradicting Ian's story about Erin having a different plate. Ian says, no, the plate was smaller, the different coloured plate. So it sounds like there is a dispute over this plate issue and the defence may call some evidence later on when it's their turn.
This was a really interesting exchange in court last week because it was one of only a couple of kind of like actual sort of challenges and pushes from the defence against a witness. Is that unusual to only have had a couple of moments at this point of a trial? It's
definitely not been a trial where the lawyers have been at each other or there's been hostile exchanges like we sometimes see in cases. It's been pretty civil, and I think one of the reasons for that is there's only a few things that are in dispute in this trial, and Erin Patterson's intent is obviously the number one thing. Did she mean to kill these people? So they haven't been going at each other that intently.
Yeah. There's been no objection, Your Honour, at any point throughout this trial.
No, there's been a couple of times when one lawyer has got up to, yes, formally raised an objection, but they've not been shouting out "objection, Your Honour," or getting in each other's faces. Everyone has been pretty civil in the courtroom, but sometimes, in other cases, it gets a bit hostile.
Yeah. With the way the defence is approaching this, kind of, not necessarily challenging that much about the prosecution's case, I mean, does that give us any insight into their strategy for how they're going to try and defend Erin Patterson?
At the end of the day, the onus is on the prosecution to prove the case. They have to come up with the evidence that is solid, that satisfies the jury beyond reasonable doubt that she's guilty of these charges. And if they can't do that, Erin Patterson's not guilty. It's as simple as that. The onus is on the prosecution.
Speaking about the prosecution, we have a question here from Saren. They're asking about the prosecution's decision to not specify a motive for Erin Patterson. They find this a really odd decision. Is the jury supposed to fill in the blanks?
Reading back to that prosecution opening, Nanette Rogers, the lead prosecutor, said, "The prosecution will not be suggesting that there was a particular motive to do what she did." So the prosecution was pretty upfront about that, but a motive is not one of the 4 elements of murder that needs to be proven. So there's 4 elements to murder, and these all have to be ticked off, if you will.
Right.
They've got to be ticked off in order. So number 1, did Erin Patterson cause the deaths of the lunch guests? If the jury's satisfied of that, they can move on to step number 2. Step number 2, did she do it deliberately? If they're satisfied of that, then they need to look at, did she do it with an intention to kill them or to cause really serious injury? Emphasis on the word really. If they're satisfied of that as well, we get to the final point. Did she commit the killing without a lawful justification or excuse? So it would be, self-defense, for instance, which plainly is not relevant to this case. So Justice Christopher Beale has said to the jury that one of the key points in this trial is going to be that point number 3. Did she do it with an intention to kill or cause serious injury?
Yeah. And so, don't need a motive, which is, something I'd never realised before coming into this. And
don't need a motive. The prosecution, however, has highlighted some tensions that Erin Patterson had with her extended family, namely her estranged husband, Simon, the person who didn't turn up to the lunch. But as we've said, they've not gone as far to say that those tensions and disagreements over things like money or child custody are the reasons why she would go and commit an alleged murder.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I had not realised before getting into this and covering this so intently that, that wasn't always a really core part of these proceedings. So wonderful question, Sarah, and thank you for sending it in. We've got a question here from Jeff, who's emailed from Hanko on the southwest tip of Finland.
Fantastic.
G'day, Jeff. He's got a question that we've had a lot. I would say we've probably been sent this question at least 50 times, I think, over the last couple of weeks. So it's a question a lot of you want to know the answer to. His question is, will Erin Patterson give evidence?
That's a brilliant question. I have the same question too. We are all hanging out for the answer to that. We'll find out when the prosecution closes its case. The defence will get its chance to state if they have any evidence or any witnesses they would like to call. And if so, Erin Patterson may be one of those witnesses, but we hang out and wait in anticipation.
Yeah, we'll find out at, I suppose towards the end of the proceedings in this trial, which will be very interesting. And when, if and when that happens, we'll have all the details that very afternoon on Mushroom Case Daily to bring you the latest on all of that. A question here from Maria from Preston. This is a question about reasonable doubt.
Yep.
Maria says, I'm struggling with the concept of reasonable doubt and how it applies in this case. What is the bar, no pun intended, for reasonable doubt? Do the jury get any training, advice or direction on what equates to reasonable doubt?
So they got some limited instructions at the start of the trial. and they'll get some really detailed instructions at the end once all the evidence and the closing arguments are done. But in summary, Justice Christopher Beale told the jury that if Erin Patterson is to be found guilty, the charges have to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. Now, that is described as the highest standard of proof that our law demands. So something being probably guilty or very likely doesn't quite cut it. So, yeah, it's kind of vague what it means, but it's something where the jury is told to use their common sense. It doesn't have to be 100% watertight when they look at all of the elements. But if they add them all up and it all points one way, then it's beyond reasonable doubt.
Great. Thank you, Kristian. We have had a huge number of questions as well about the jury, how the jury works, who's on the jury, where they come from, all of that. I picked out a few of these kind of key points just to dive into a few of these key questions. First one here from Sana. They've asked, why are there 10 men and 5 women on the jury? Shouldn't there be gender equality? Great question, Sana.
Thanks, Sana. The jury was picked by a random ballot. So there was a big pool of about 120 odd that turned up for the very first day of the trial. They were all assigned a number, and from there those numbers were pulled out of a box. So 15 have been chosen for this panel. That will eventually be whittled down to 12. And again, those final 3 who will be cut will be a random ballot. We weren't able to view the jury selection, which was a little bit disappointing, I must say. Generally, media like to watch this process to see the challenges, for instance, but we weren't able to do that in this particular case.
No worries. Thank you, Kristian. Question here from Kirsten, another one on juries. In Australia, are juries allowed to discuss the trial amongst one another during lunch breaks?
Well, if they go out for lunch, they're strongly discouraged because you just never know who's in the cafe around you, especially if they go for a very short walk. There could be lawyers, there could be members of the public, so it's pretty risky. They're strongly discouraged from doing that. If they're having their lunch in the jury room, it's advised that all the jury members be together for discussions and you don't sort of splinter off into little groups and discuss the case. But yeah, the big worry is that someone will be chatting outside and it's overheard.
Yeah. You mentioned a trial that you'd worked on previously where the jury actually stayed late and would compare notes throughout the day.
Every jury is different. Some of them rock up, just before the start time and head home as soon as court is finished. There was a case last year where there was a bit of confusion, actually, as to why the jury was hanging around after court. And the judge sought an explanation and he was told they're just really studious. They like to compare notes at the end of each day. But not all juries are like that.
That's a fascinating insight into the life of a juror. Another question on the jury from Caitlin and Stuart, who are driving around Australia. They're currently in Cape Palmerston. Their question is about what the jury gets for lunch. Is it catered? Do they get takeaway, or do they have to bring a sandwich from home?
They can bring a sandwich if they like, or they can go out for lunch. I don't think it is catered. Maybe during the jury deliberations, when they're all locked in the room together, they might get some catering. But definitely during the trial, they've got to be responsible for their own food. It's
actually something that I think about a bit when we're getting lunch as well, because, again, the jury can pop out and go and get lunch somewhere else. I'm always really mindful to make sure I'm not talking about the case when we're in a cafe or something like that, because we could have a juror around us or something.
Absolutely. And jurors and members of the media, in this country anyway, are directed to stay well clear of each other.
Yeah, there was a moment that was quite entertaining. I think we spoke about this quite early in the trial where the jurors were reminded that don't take it personally if a member from one of the legal teams doesn't look at you or doesn't acknowledge you as they walk past you. They're not supposed to. They're just doing their job. So they're not ignoring you. They're not blanking you. That's the way it's supposed to work. Finally, this is another question we have had a few times, but we've had this from Emily from Geelong. She says, my mum and I are hoping to come to Morwell for a day to watch the trial. However, we live in Geelong, so it will be quite a journey for us. Is there much room available in the public gallery? Has it been full so far, or are there likely to be spare seats if we do come? Emily realises it will change day to day, but just wants to get an idea to see if it's worth making the trip.
Thanks, Emily. There are a few seats that are available for the public. There's roughly about 40 seats in total in this room, but a lot of them are taken up by members of the extended Patterson and Wilkinson families. There's some media seats which have been assigned to reporters as well. There are some keen court watchers that come along and like to stake a claim. So the risk that you run, Emily, is that you'll turn up, not get a seat, and unfortunately you'll just have to wait outside the courtroom. So by all means, if you're willing to take the risk, do come. There's a chance you'll get a seat, but I really would hate for you to be disappointed and spend the day sitting in a lobby.
Thank you, Kristian. Yeah, it does change day to day around the access to the room. So there might be a quiet day, there might be a busy day. It's very hard to predict.
I would suggest if you're coming by, maybe have something else planned in the area. Maybe you want to stop in Morwell or one of the other towns. Don't make it the sole reason to travel just in case it doesn't go well.
Very good advice. Very good travel advice generally, though, I think. Don't
have a backup plan.
Yeah, exactly. Not all your eggs in one basket. Thank you so much to everyone who has emailed in a question over the last couple of weeks. Please keep them coming. mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au is where you can get to us. We're very keen to answer your questions. There's a lot that we can't answer just for legal reasons. If it's not said in front of the jury, we can't say it. Don't worry, though. We're keeping a record. And once this trial wraps up, we will actually go through and answer some of the ones that we couldn't answer during the trial.
Yeah, it's difficult not being able to answer all the questions that are coming in. We want to do it, and we'll do our best to get around to them at the end.
We do have some final shout-outs that I'd like to get to from some of our more far-flung listeners. Kristian, I've given you a list of names. Do you want to help me run through this one?
Yeah, we've got a shout-out to Grace, who's in Catania, Sicily. Lynn, who has emailed in from Hammerfest in Norway, which she says is the world's most northerly city. I wanted to verify that fact, so I jumped on Google and found Hammerfest on the Visit Norway website. And this is an incredible place, Stocky. You've got fjords, you've got camels, luscious green hills. It looks like an incredible place to visit, and Lynn, we are very jealous.
Absolutely. We've also heard from Haley in Hood River, Oregon, Jeff in Hanko, Finland, Claire in Chattanooga in Tennessee, and my final shout-out, or our final shout-out, I should say, goes to Jenny and Holly, who are listening to the podcast on a bus through Azerbaijan to the Georgian border. The case has been a great source of discussion for our small tour group of Australians, Canadians and Americans.
Fascinating.
We really do love hearing all of your feedback, all of your questions, so please keep it coming. Make sure you track down Mushroom Case Daily on the ABC Listen app and hit follow there. If you're listening to us on a different podcast platform, please rate us and review us. It means it's much easier for other people to find us and join the Mushroom Case Daily family.
Yeah, and for more, ABC News has been covering this trial really extensively. We've got a lot of written articles, television stories as well, so you can track those all down, and that'll just add to the level of coverage of this case.
That's it for this episode of Mushroom Case Daily. Thank you so much for listening. We're back in court tomorrow, and we'll be back in your feed after the day's proceedings finish with an update for you. But if you are looking for something to listen to during the long wait between now and then, check out If You're Listening. They've got a 3-part series out right now that explores the influence of Trump and oligarchs like Elon Musk on elections around the world. The series is called Australia vs. the Internet, and to find it, search for If You're Listening on ABC Listen.
Mushroom Case Daily is produced by ABC Audio Studios and ABC News. It's presented by me, court reporter Kristian Silva, and producer Stephen Stockwell.
Our executive producer is Claire Rawlinson, and many thanks to the Victorian Newsroom, Audio Studios manager Eric George, and our true crime colleagues Tim Roxburgh, Rachel Brown and Yasmin Parry for helping make this show a reality. This episode was produced on the land of the Wurundjeri people.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.
Hi, Jules and Jez here, and every week on Not Stupid, we unpack the news of the week.
And he says, well, you've got a podcast about cake. I said, excuse me, my podcast is about news and current affairs. How dare you? And he goes, Well, you and Julia have a lot to say about cake.
Yeah, we've barely started. You can find Not Stupid on the ABC Listen app.